Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay. You think we need it?
Yeah.
I can hear what you're saying. I don't care.
Come up.
So this is, yeah, come close. I'm not armed. I took my meds. I think. Oh, we're not. I lied, I haven't. I'm dangerous if I don't take these. That one's the wrong one. Okay, we call this meeting. This is your meeting.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to say. This Monday nights when I'm here, we have open mic. And so we talk about whatever you want, questions, comments, subject matter. So who's got the courage to kick it off? I was having a nice discussion with Rachel. Do you have any questions or comments?
No.
We were talking about the real definition of love. And, in the mature world, so many people talk about love. And Srila Prabhupada has pointed out that in this mature world, very few people have any idea. They don't even have the first concept of what love really is. Because I can say I love so many things, I love, boy, I love that kurta. I love your music. I love your car, I love your hair, I love your shoes. Don't you love this weather? And then you tell somebody, I love you. Well, what does that really mean when somebody says, I love you? Because I just heard you say you love the weather. So I have to make it up in my own mind. Oh, you mean, you see, but I have to fill that in for myself. So, but it's coming from someone who really has no idea what love is. Love is not something that you can turn on and then turn off again. It's not like the light switch. You turn it on when you enter the room, and turn it off when you leave. Love isn't like that. Love isn't something that I can love you as long as I can exploit you. As long as I'm getting some enjoyment from you, as long as I think you look in a certain way that is pleasing to my eyes, or maybe you sing a certain way, or whatever it is that you do, that I say that because of the enjoyment you give me, I love you. Well, then it's tainted. No, thank you. Very kind of you. That's tainted, you see, because I'm exploiting you. I'm telling you that I love you, and there's a string attached. It's based on what I get back from you. But love has no strings attached. It's unconditional. If you love somebody, you just love them. Whether they love you or not, you should be able to love them without expecting anything in return. That's real love. So that's the love that Krishna has for a living entity. Krishna loves us in just such a way that it's unconditional. Even though we may come to this mature world and try to get away from him, try to hide, we try to find other things to enjoy, other things to serve, put ourselves in the center of our world, and so many things. Krishna's love never stops. Our love for him stops. We withdraw it. And what do we do with our love when we withdraw it from God? Where does it go? It goes to me. Instead of loving God, I start to love me. I start to put myself in the center. Sometimes I hear people say, when I'm speaking at yoga studios, I hear people say, well, I think what we need today is, I think people need to learn how to love themselves. And that sounds so sweet and so poetic, doesn't it? You need to learn how to love yourself. Actually, no. You probably love yourself a little bit more than you need to. We need to learn how to love God, and we need to learn how to love everyone else. You see? Well, why is that? Because God loves us, and He always has. Krishna has always never stopped loving us. So, as a matter of fact, Krishna is the supreme lover. And if He's always loved you, you've always been supremely loved, which means it's a love you can't even measure. It's more love than you could get from all living entities put together. It's the supreme, unmeasurable love, you see. So if anything, we've been overloved. So what we need to do is we need to learn how to love. There's a saying that if you go out looking for a friend, you may find that they're very scarce. But if you go out to be a friend, you'll have friends everywhere. If you go out looking for love, it's going to be hard to find. If you go out to offer love, you're going to be swimming in it. You'll drown in it, you see. So, the purpose of the living entity is to, and the living entity is only satisfied when they're offering love to the Supreme and all of His living entities. Now, why do I not have to worry about me? Why don't I have to love me? Because I'm loved by God. I have supreme love, you see. The only time that I could think that I'm not being loved well enough is when I've lost consciousness of Him in my relationship with Him. Anytime you feel unloved or underloved, it just means you're in illusion. You've lost connection with your original true self-identity as a lover of God. You have before we come to this material world, we have an eternal, loving relationship with the Supreme. See? And He doesn't stop. We stop when we come here to follow our whims on trying to enjoy and trying to exploit the material nature and all of the other entities that are here. It's the nature of everyone in the material world to exploit. See? Because I want to enjoy. So, and I want to enjoy separate from God. You see? I'm not going to Him for my enjoyment. I'm trying to get it from the material energy. Material energy is limited. You see? So I have to exploit this one, exploit that one. Sometimes I find somebody, I can exploit them by trying to convince them that I love them because there's some exchange. And then I may find someone else and I think, oh, wait a minute, I think I can enjoy you even more. So, I'm sorry, but it's over. I don't need you anymore. I found someone else that I can exploit more than I can exploit you now, you see. So that's the nature of the quote-unquote love in the material world. It's really not. It's really not love. So the purpose of this Krishna consciousness, this is an organization, this International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is an organization to where we can learn how to, or relearn, how to love God and all other living entities. And somewhere along the line, we'll get to the point where we feel, I'm okay. I'm loved enough. I'm loved more than I deserve. I'm loved more than I can handle, really. I'm loved from the Supreme Lord. So I'm okay. I don't need to worry about me. But I'm concerned about the other living entities who are suffering only because their consciousness isn't awakened. So therefore, we need to help others awaken their consciousness so they can learn that they're loved and then learn how to love God and all living entities. Did you have a question, Mark? Oh. All right, so it's supposed to be your night, so I'm doing all the talking. I'm gonna stop if you don't start asking questions. Yeah.
Could you speak a bit about relationship of the Atman and Brahman? How it seems that read in the Upanishads that there's a identification between the innermost self is identical, essentially with the God, with Brahman. Atman is the Brahman, and how that relationship is that would a kind of a consummation of one's love for God make that apparent, or can you speak a bit about that?
That's an excellent question.
There's a lot of confusion in the so-called spiritual world. Our original, if we want to call it a sin, our original mistake that we made when we're eternal living entities, and for eternity we had a loving relationship with Krishna. We decided that we wanted to enjoy separately from Him. In other words, my dear Lord, you're in the center of everything here. And that's very wonderful, but I kind of like to be the center. I'd like to see what it's like to be the center. And what I may not realize, or I might realize, is I really want to be you. You see, I think I can do what you do. I can be the center and have everybody, all the attention focused on me, you see. So, we can't do that there in His kingdom. So He's so kind that He creates a place for us in this material world that we can come and be the center and compete with all the other people here that want to be the center as well. You see? So that original flaw in our consciousness is that I want to be God. Whether we want to, sometimes some people will come out and admit it to you. They believe they are God. There's a whole sect of people that call themselves spiritualists that believe they're God. We're all God. I'm God, you're God. We're all one together. And there is partial truth in that. But if you add all of us living entities together, we don't equal God. He's still separate. So, in order for me to feel good about my belief, I believe that I can become liberated by practicing very strict spiritual process, yoga, mystic yoga, Ashtanga yoga, and go merge into the light, being personal Brahman. I'll become that, you see. So in other words, we still have that original flaw, although we may achieve liberation. But it's only partial liberation, you see, because that impersonal Brahman is only the covering of the spiritual world. It's just the surface. So even though you've left the material world and you're not taking birth after birth, death, you're there, but you don't have the ultimate prize. It's like somebody gives you a present for your birthday, and it's wrapped in this really beautiful, if they buy it at a really expensive department store, like Neiman Marcus, they can wrap it really nicely. It's really beautiful. And they give you this beautiful package, and you think, oh, thank you, this is beautiful, I'll treasure this forever. They say, no, you fool, take the wrapper off, there's a gift inside. There's a $25,000 Rolex watch inside, you fool. And you're thinking, but it's so beautiful. But no, it's more beautiful inside. The substance is on the inside. So this type of liberation, merging, you can do it. It's possible. We don't say it can't be done. You can do it. But it's like you're looking for something that you're just not going to get. It's like, as Srila Prabhupada says, it's like trying to taste honey by licking the jar. You may be convinced that as you're licking the honey jar, this is really sweet. But come on, if you got inside the jar, you get a real taste. You see. So the Atma is us, the living entity. We're the Jivatma. The Supreme Brahman is Krishna, God. See, so the difference is, now, if you took a DNA sample of Krishna and a DNA sample of us, the Atma, it's all exactly the same. It's the same substance. We are the same stuff as he is. But at the same time, we're individual. We are not him. He remains him, and we remain us. It's like if you're flying over a beach, you look at it, if you've never seen a beach before, you can think it's really just one big thing down there next to the water. But when you get down here, you find out it's a whole billions of little tiny pieces of sand. It looks like one big thing, but it's really a bunch of individuals. So it's like that. All of us aren't going to merge together into a suit. We can believe that we can, and we can actually go believe that we have. But we still remain individuals. And that's only partial liberation. And it's also temporary. Because it can't give you what you ultimately need. If you are merged into the light, as people talk about, the near-death experiences, if you're merged into the light, how are you going to exchange love? How are you going to feel loved? Here we are in this material world feeling we don't get enough love. So I'm going to get liberation and merge into the light. How's that going to solve my problem? You see? But our original identity is servant, loving servant of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Krishna has unlimited names and unlimited identities. But he says, I'm the Supreme Personality, because it's the personality of Krishna that we exchange love with. Now there are other personalities of God. They manifest in different ways because people have different faith. And they have a different desire to interface with God. Very few people in the beginning of their spiritual life can wrap their mind around the concept of a God that's a personal friend. Some people feel more comfortable with a God that they need to fear a little bit, or have a lot of awe and respect for, groveling. And that's, I'd rather keep him arm's length, you see. Basically because if I get around him, he's going to steal the show. Nobody's going to be noticing me. He's incredibly wonderful, all attractive. He's got that thing going for him. And I left him because I wanted to get that going for me, you see. But I may feel that I really need to be religious because I'm afraid of what may happen if I don't. So then I'll offer some respect, some awe and reverence, and keep him over there. So, but the process of Krishna consciousness is to teach people that you can have a loving exchange with God if you become a servant. That's your natural position. It's like telling a fish that you will enjoy much better if you get off the beach and go back into the water. You see, it's true. And if we tell people that if you become a loving servant of God, a lot of people think, doesn't sound like what I want to do. This servant thing. But what am I going to be, a maid or a butler? Everybody in this Goloka Vrindavan that are servants, they must have a really tight immigration, really great border control or something. They don't have any illegal immigrants to cut the grass or to do those things. So they want to recruit me to be a menial servant. That doesn't sound very attractive. You know, I'd rather be served. I'd rather be God. You say, I mean, I want to be higher up the chain. I don't want to be the person offering love. I want to be receiving love. I want to be the enjoyer. But it's not our nature as living entities to be enjoyers, although that's kind of hard to believe, isn't it? Because we spend our lives trying to enjoy. But it's not our true nature. Our true nature is to be enjoyed. When we're enjoyed, we feel enjoyment. We feel great pleasure. When we give great pleasure to God, that gives us great pleasure. When he sees that we're having great pleasure, that gives him great pleasure, which gives us great pleasure, and so on, ever increasing, back and forth. And when the reciprocation between God and all the other living entities takes place, then our joy, our ecstasy, starts to increase and increases for eternity. And not just by 1 or 2%, by tremendous leaps and bounds. Forever. You see, you get caught up in this bliss, loving exchange, because that's what we are. We are his servant. We are his loving servant. Just like a good example is the love of a mother. The mother loves the child unconditionally. You know, she bathes the child and changes the dirty diapers and prepares food and, you know, does so many services. She's not asking anything in exchange. It's not like when you get out of college, you know, now you're ready to go out and go to work and take care of yourself. Your mother comes to you with a bill, and she says, that's going to be $942,000.67. Do you want to, I take cash or American Express or Visa? You know, she doesn't ask for any payback. Her payback is for you to be happy. I want you to be functioning and happy. So that's the best representation of unconditional love in the material world. You see. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Is that too wordy? Did I
No,
get too
no,
wordy?
it's okay.
It's you know, it's not a short answer for
Yeah, I thought it
it's
might.
a very good question.
Yeah, I thought about it a lot, thanks.
Yeah, I can tell you thought. That's deep thinking. That's good. That's true spiritual thinking. You know, a lot of people ask, you know, lesser intelligent thing. That's a very intelligent question.
Thanks for your help.
Who else?
I have a question on top of that question and then your answer, and now I have another question
Oh, good.
off that. So I've studied a little bit of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and from the scripture that I read in the Bhagavad Gita, and not much of Hare Krishna, so I'm trying to differentiate what the difference is between these different religions or whatever you call it. But my question is, so talking about Brahman and the Atman and the Jiva, you're saying that the Brahman is separate from Atman and Jiva. It sounded like in some ways. And what I learned is that love is the only truth. Love is the only truth. And then Brahman has created this play for us to believe that this is real. This play that we're all in, and these material things that we see, and you know, these desires that we have and things like that. But none of them are real. Like the only truth is love. And that we are Brahman, and that we are, like you were saying earlier, some people will say that
Yeah.
I am God and you are God and I am you and you are me, and there's no separation, but we're veiled and you can't see that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Hare Krishna, the difference is that there is a symbol of Krishna, and Krishna is God, and Krishna is who you are a servant of,
Right.
and that's kind of the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, and that's a good subject.
Mm-hmm.
There are many schools of thought where people believe that way, that we're all God. And so you say, well, if you're God, you know, I talked to you a few weeks ago, and you were kind of having a hard time.
Sure.
You know, your boyfriend had dumped you for somebody else, you know, you you broke a nail, the mail was late, you got fired from your job. Doesn't sound like you're having a great life, you know. I've known some people that were abused when they were young, and now they have the philosophy that they're God. So what are you doing in this mess if you're the supreme Godhead?
But
So
didn't he create it? Like,
why? I mean,
That's the big
but
question.
Why would, if I'm God,
mhm.
why would I be sitting here in the body of an old man?
Why not?
Nobody wants to be an old man. Trust me. I mean, I can give you firsthand
Well,
proof of that. Nobody wants to get old.
maybe, yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't have the
What
answers
about
to
people
that, but
who's-
there's one.
What about people who are really sick and,
Mhm.
you know, they lose a limb and
But that's karma, right? Like, that's
Yeah,
like
but
the
if
life
you're-
and
but if
death,
you're God-
rebirth.
if you're God, why are you suffering the effects of karma?
Because we're alive and it's beautiful. Like, even though there's pain and there's suffering, there's also joy and birth.
I know,
That
but there's
comes
pain
with
and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're God, why are you subjecting yourself to pain and suffering? Now, some people say, well, because I want to have the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then, but if you're the supreme Godhead, the all-knowing, all-omniscient entity, supreme entity, if you're all-knowing, all-omniscient, you already know what it would be like. You don't have to come here and suffer the heat and the cold and birth and death and disease and old age. You don't have to do this because you know what it is, because it all is going to emanate from you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So
What's
why would you-
sadhana then?
Huh?
What's sadhana? Or
Sadhana-
ananda? Mhm.
Sadhana is basically a practice
Mhm.
to control our consciousness
Mhm.
into a spiritual mode. Sadhana begins with chanting of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And by doing that, the translation of that prayer, we're praying to the feminine energy of Krishna. We're praying to Radha. Hara is Radha. Hare Krishna. We're addressing Radharani. My dear Lord, please engage me in your loving devotional service. In other words, please restore me to my original position. Please give me, that means give me self-realization. If you were a fish, it would mean, please put me back in the water. Because I'm out of the water and I'm suffering like everything. You see, so that's the supreme sadhana. Along with that comes rising early in the morning, chanting mantras, worshiping the Lord, offering some service to the Lord, serving the other living entities. You see, that's all part of sadhana. It's to control our consciousness in a spiritual mode. If we don't do that, then we'll follow the whims of our mind. I think I'll do this, I think I'll do that. For me, because I will enjoy, I, me, mine, which is that's the disturbance that we have that causes us all of our suffering. But if we focus through the practice of sadhana back onto the Supreme, then we start to feel relief. You see, we start to feel Jivananda. Sat is a Sanskrit word. Sat means eternal. The living entity's nature is to be eternal. Never having a beginning, never having an end. Chit means full of knowledge, to know everything. To have practically the knowledge that God has, which is a lot of knowledge. In other words, I'm never wondering, what about this? I need, to be restored to my original position, I need to know everything. I need to realize that I'm eternal. I need to have my full knowledge back. And Ananda, eternally blissful. You see, the nature of the living entity is to always be blissful. No glitches, no unhappiness. Always the pleasure feeling of Ananda, bliss. You see, so that's our nature as a liberated living entity. And when we're encased in these bodies and believing that we're this body, we can be in the body and be liberated. But as long as I'm convinced that I am this body, that I am a human being, I am an earthling, I'm an American, I'm a this or I'm a that, I'm a male, I'm a female, then we're identifying with something that we're completely not. We are not any of these. All these other things are temporary. So, once I can get back to my original position, now I know who I am. I'm eternal, I'm full of knowledge, and I'm eternally blissful. So liberation is consciousness. Even though I'm still in this body, I know that it's not me. Even though I know that it's going to die, I know I'm not going to die. I know that I'm the eternal living entity. And I know what my position is. I'm the eternal servant. And I can do that now. I don't have to wait till I die to regain my original consciousness. You see, I don't have to wait till death to become an eternal servant of God and all other living entities. I can do that now. I don't have to wait till I die to become eternally blissful. I can do that now. But I have to give up the material consciousness. And it's not like I give it up, just give it up. It doesn't really work that way. You see, people talk about when we take up spiritual life of giving things up. Well, we do, but it's not the way we envision it. And therefore, giving up things that we're attached to seem very difficult, you see. But it's just like when a child, you have a small child and they maybe they're crawling around and they get something that's breakable or may hurt them, you know. You need to get it away from them. And if you reach and grab it, they're going to do what? Because now there's a void. I had it, and you took it away, now I want it back. So what you do is you get something else. And as you take this away, you give them that. So now they think, oh, hey, this is great. They focus their attention on that. So if you fill your consciousness with spiritual activity, sadhana, spiritual consciousness, the spiritual consciousness will push out the material consciousness. You see? So you're not really giving anything up. You're intaking so much that's spiritual that the negative flows away. You see? It's like with your mind. It's garbage in, garbage out. You put enough garbage in your mind, you'll start to speak garbage. If you listen to the TV, if you listen to the news, you'll be criticizing Obama or George Bush or whoever's in the office. And you'll be talking, if you go around talking to certain people, you'll be believing all the conspiracy theories and you'll be talking about it too. I see people I get around the world and all over the world people are talking about conspiracy theories. You know, the Illuminati is going to take over and make us all slaves. And I said, I always play dumb, which is very easy for me. I said, oh, really? What are they going to do with us? And they start speaking like they've got this authority, like, oh, it's going to be this. And, oh, really? Well, where's your proof? How do you know this? Oh, don't you know? Well, how do you know? You know, do you have some CIA documents that you're not showing anybody? Did anybody show anything to you? You see, you're hearing it, and now you're speaking it. It's just like if people talk about, if you hang around with people who talk sports, then you're going to find yourself talking about sports or movies or entertainment or whatever. But if you associate with people who discuss the glories of the Supreme Lord, guess what you're going to be talking about? You see? Nectar in, nectar out. Garbage in, garbage out. So the devotee fills his mind through sadhana and associating with like-minded people, fills his mind in such a way that that's what he becomes focused on. And that's what we discuss. And other people may say, well, boy, that looks like a real austerity. You know, to never talk about anything but God. I mean, who could do something like that? I mean, God here, God there, is God this and God that. I mean, don't you ever talk about All this other cool stuff? No, I'm not interested. You see? Not interested. I have zero interest. I mean, it's a little interesting once in a while to hear, that I heard there was an airplane went missing. I thought that was interesting. I mean, I don't want to hear it every day. I'm going to talk with, it's not going to be a subject of what I discuss with people. Hey, did you hear about that airline? But I heard about it. I think I saw it on, I just got back from India. The internet's not real good in India. You've got to go to an internet cafe to get internet. And I don't like going to those internet cafes, so I would go check email once in a while. And, when my homepage comes up, I'll see a little news tip, thing. And I might look at it and, wow, a whole airplane went missing? That's interesting. I didn't go tell anybody about it. Hey, did you hear about that? But I did say, hey, have you ever thought about how wonderful it is to be here in this wonderful place, Krishna's home, you see. So, we train ourselves to concentrate, meditate on things that are spiritually uplifting. We don't have time for all this down stuff. You see, I've had people tell me, don't you realize the end is near? Remember the Y2K thing? Remember it was all going to blow away? Everything was going to stop. So, I knew several people that were really kind of wacky about that. I said, no, I don't think so. I really don't think so. But I don't know, and I don't really care. I know that Krishna's going to always take care of us, and he has a plan. Whatever that plan is what we're going to get. So, but there's always been people who are saying the end is near. It's all going to, it just can't get any worse. I remember when I was a kid in Chicago, I'd go down to the downtown and I'd be walking, and there's always somebody walking around back then with a sign, the end is near. Gosh, that was 50 years ago. The end didn't come. It never has. So there are people who dwell on things like that. There's a lot of negative in the world that we could dwell on. But there's a lot of positive. The positive is that there is God, and he wants us to regain our lost relationship with him. That's really good news. You see, he wants us to have our loving relationship back. So if God wants it, he's kind of the guy that usually gets what he wants, then it's really positive. If he wants it and I want it, well, we've got a winner. We've got a home run here, don't we? The only problem is, he wants it and I don't. I want my material life. I want fame, profit, adoration, and distinction. I want money. I'm going to go get a great education, get a great job, maybe get some, become accomplished in my field so I get a little bit of fame. I'll find a great mate so I'll have adoration. And I'll be distinguished for something that I do. They'll have a statue of me somewhere in a square. And the pigeons will pass through on it. So, fame, profit, adoration, and distinction. Those are the four motivating factors. That's why people do things. I want some compensation. That's my profit. Some fame, notoriety, and someone will adore me for it. Why else do people do things in the material world? Some people say, well, what about the guy that built the hospital? He took his fortune, his hard-earned money, he built this hospital. Yeah, and he's got his name on it. And then you go to his business, you say, hey, aren't you Fred Smith, the guy that built Fred Smith Hospital? Well, yeah, well, I think I'll do business with you, so you gain from it, you see. So motivation is there. Spiritual motivation is I want to please the Supreme Lord and all the other living entities. I want to do something to please them. I don't even want anything in return. I don't care if anybody even knows that I'm doing something for them. I want the privilege of doing it. So, now, did you have another question? Did I answer it? No. Okay.
I'd like to know about, I feel like spiritual practice through creativity is something that is a very positive and joyful thing in my life and in the life the creativity that I can share with others. But I'm just curious about your take on materialism and creativity of art that's tangible items, because like music, we can share music and have a spiritual moment together, and this is something that isn't bought or sold, and we all feel the sunlight from that.
Yeah.
But then there's other creative practices like painting or I maybe writing music or something, and that sort of poetry and or tattoos or creating sculptures, and that those are material objects, and sometimes those material objects can lead you to keep making more of them, so that it's like getting by, being a creative person, and that is part of a devotion that I feel, but I also feel like it's materialistic. So what's your take on that?
But you can spiritualize anything. You can spiritualize if you're a musician. It's just like, you may be a great guitar player. We actually have a great musician here. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. How long ago did you discover Krishna consciousness?
1 year ago.
1 year ago. Up until that, your music was what? Completely material. Since then, your music has become completely spiritual. He makes some great CDs. He's very, very accomplished, singing about the glories of Krishna in his own style, his own creativity. He's used his talent to glorify the Lord's names, and therefore he's caused a lot of devotees and a lot of people to be very, very happy. So he's used that service. He's offered his talent as a service. So now his material qualification became a spiritual qualification. And you can do that if you're a sculptor or a painter or a poet. Another good instance, for instance, was George Harrison. George Harrison was a complete materialist. Complete and total materialist. Until he met Srila Prabhupada. He had a meeting with Prabhupada after he heard the philosophy. And this is right after the Beatles broke up. And so it was in London. And George Harrison said, Srila Prabhupada, I want to become your devotee. And Prabhupada says, you are my devotee. He said, I want to become your disciple. I want to give everything I own to you. All of my money, everything. And I just want to be like a temple devotee. And Srila Prabhupada said, I humbly accept everything you have. And now, with love, I give it back to you. And George says, why? And Prabhupada said, use it in Krishna's service. And so George pondered that. And he went out and he started writing these incredible songs. He came out with Living in the Material World album, which was full of Hare Krishna this and Hare Krishna that. He came out with that My Sweet Lord, with the chanting of Hare Krishna. These all went, number ones. He ended up making more money on his own in just a few years than he made with the Beatles. He wasn't even looking for money. He didn't want any. He already had fame. He was already rich. He had so much money he didn't think he could ever spend it all. But because he started to glorify Krishna, his wealth started to grow. And grow and grow. Then he got into making movies where he could interject a little bit of Krishna conscious philosophy. And he made even more money, you see. So he used everything he had to serve Krishna. And became glorious for him, even though he didn't want any more money. When he passed away, he was fabulously wealthy. Very nice devotee of Krishna. So that's a good example. We can purify, we can spiritualize anything. Anything, everything is God's energy. Everything emanates from Krishna. So, but unless it's used in his service, it's as if it really doesn't even exist. You see? It's like Srila Prabhupada gave the for instance of this microphone. If we don't use this for Krishna's service, then it's misused. This belongs to Krishna. The technology that we have for this thing to make an amplified sound comes from him, although we may say, I discovered. No, it comes from him. God is that from which everything emanates. So, if we use this in his service, Prabhupada said it becomes Krishnaized. It becomes spiritualized. You see? Now it becomes real. Anything that's not used in the service of God is really not real. You see? Does that make any sense? So we do that with our lives. If our lives are simply spent in pursuit of material pleasure, then we're living a useless life. It's useless. Because material senses can never really be satisfied. We always want more. But we become, in spiritual pursuits, we become very satisfied. And then it continues to grow. Even though we may not think, we may think, I don't see how it could get any better. Life is so sweet and wonderful. Isn't it like that? And then tomorrow you realize it's even better today. And you think year after year, decade after decade, when will this ever stop? It's just always ever increasing. And then you realize sometime or other, this isn't ever going to stop. And then you start to depend on it, always increasing. You start to get used to it. Without you having to try to make it increase. It just does. Because that's the nature of spiritual life. You don't have to work on it. You don't have to wind it up. See? Once you get it going, it is what it is. But you have to get the momentum going. And you have to keep the pursuit of love of Godhead first and foremost. And if you do that, Krishna will do everything for you. We don't have the potency to do it. See, this is the difference between the yogis we were talking about. The yogis who believe, I can, through my mysticism, practicing this Ashtanga yoga or this, that, or whatever, that I will be liberated and I'll go merge into the impersonal Brahman. Of course, they don't call it the impersonal Brahman. They just call it the Brahman. I'll have Brahman realization. So that's where I'll go. And from my efforts, I will achieve that. Which is foolishness. We don't have any potency. All potency comes from the Supreme Lord. We are his energy, but he's the energetic. It's like the sun. In the daytime you can see the sun come through a window. And you can hold your hand and you can feel it. It's warm. So this sunlight that you're seeing and feeling, that's the sun, isn't it? It is the sun. But yet the sun is 93 million miles away. So this is the energy of the sun. But that's the energetic. The energy is coming from the sun. So, we're the energy of God. He's the energetic. He's the source of us. You see? So whatever we want, it's coming from Him. All we have to do is to turn to Him and say, my dear Lord, please engage me in your loving service. And we get Him. He says, okay, that's liberation. When you're engaged in His service and your love for Him grows, then you're liberated. Because now you're self-realized. You know who you are. You know what your purpose is. You know what your activities are. And He makes the promise again and again in Bhagavad Gita, I will deliver you. Have no fear. Anything else? Wait, we need to wrap it up, don't we? What time did we stop? About now. We've got time for one more quick question if somebody has one more.
How can we share love the best we can?
What's that again?
How can we share love the best we can?
The best we can, it's just like the analogy that Srila Prabhupada uses. It's just like if you have a plant and the leaves are starting to get brown. So you realize, well, this plant needs water. So if I take and I pour water on the leaves are brown. If I pour water on the leaves, that ought to do the trick, right? No. We have to pour water on the root. If I water the root, then all the branches and twigs and leaves get the benefit. So, to share love, I have to direct my love to the root, to Krishna. If I direct my love to God, all living entities get the benefit. I actually learn how to love, in a purified manner. Spiritual love. Eternal. Love isn't something that has a duration. There's no duration to it. It doesn't come about, last for a while, and go away. That's something else. We give it that term, but it's not love. You see. So to love, direct our love. Let's learn how to love God. Once we can do that, we can learn how to share love with one another. All living entities. No matter what they think about us. They may think, well, I think you're an absolute fool. Thinking of God as a beautiful blue boy playing on a flute. You're insane. We're not concerned. Doesn't stop us from loving them. God gives you free will. Everybody has free will. Everyone's entitled to believe however they want to. Our purpose is to say there is a relationship with God that's on a personal, loving level. We present it. If people are ready to accept it, then that's very wonderful. If not, then I believe someday they will. And they may pursue so many other things. I want to merge with God. I'm already God. Whatever. Go for that. Go for it. And I'll see you down the road. Some lifetime, some planet, somewhere. Sooner or later you're going to say, I think I want God. I think I'd like to hold His hand. I don't want to keep Him arm's length away anymore. I want His embrace. And at that time, people, when they come to that desire, then they'll hear this philosophy. Until then, they can pursue whatever they like. All right, I think I've worn out my welcome, so let's wrap it up. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you all so much for coming.